It's a good reminder, I just said it a minute ago, but that we did decide to record and stream this event. So hello, if you're watching us from, I don't know, your couch or while you're rocking a baby or in a car, wherever you are, or in the future. Appreciating some of these conversations that we have been started over the last couple years in our spiritual parenting gatherings of various kinds. We had last year, right around this time, we talked about Lisa Miller's book, The Spiritual Child, the new science on parenting for health and lifelong thriving around the protective, some of the research out of the Teachers College in Columbia around sort of the protective powers of spirituality and a lot of those like positive health outcomes. So we dipped our toe into it last fall, and then in the winter, I think it was, the Family Connections organized a really meaningful potluck and panel around mental health, and we were really a lot talking about adolescent. There was definitely an interest and kind of desire to dig deeper there. And many of you maybe have had a chance to read the book. If you haven't yet, we have at least one copy available. I also just re-listened to it on Audible, and it's Ellen and Molly, her co-author, reading it together and like alternating. It's very lovely. So if you're looking for a good accompaniment to,
And if anyone knows how I can change careers to become a full-time voice for...
We actually have a voice actor in the congregation, Dave Elliott.
Okay. That needs to be my second career.
I'll introduce you. And welcome to Ellen. So I will do a little intro of Ellen O'Donnell. Dr. Ellen O'Donnell is a child psychologist at Mass General Hospital for Children and Shriners Hospital for Children in Boston, and an assistant professor at Harvard Medical School, where she specializes in working with children and families affected by type 1 diabetes, traumatic burn injuries, and other chronic illnesses and medical conditions. And she also has a private practice where she works with families on similar issues. She's written all kinds of articles, and the reason that we connected is because she was co-authoring this book, Bless This Mess, A Modern Guide to Faith and Parenting in a Chaotic World, with a mutual friend of ours who is also my colleague and mentor in Berkeley, California, Molly Basquette, who also has roots in the Boston area. So she and I were working together at First Congregational Church of Berkeley when they were launching this book, and I had just had my first child. Zoe was a baby.
We did a talk there.
That's right. Mm-hmm. And now full circle, and Ellen lives in Concord. So when I came out to Concord, I knew we had to continue the conversation. She does a lot of speaking events and engagement work with families with type 1 diabetes. And in her private practice, she is sought out by pediatricians and parents to really focus on the child's unique strengths, which is something we'll get to, and guiding families on the path that's right for that child and those families. And yeah, I said she lives in Concord with her husband and her two sons, Luke and Jonah, one in college and one in high school, right at Concord Carlisle. So welcome to Ellen. Will you join me in welcoming her?
Thanks for having me.
And I thought since there's a nice size of us, it's not too big, I will remind us that we are recording this, but if you don't have to, but if you would like to share your name just to introduce yourself into the space, and then the invitation is either a mess that you'd like to share, just a little icebreaker, a mess, or not share, if that's fine too, and or something that draws you to this conversation, and that you would hope that we might be able to touch on tonight. So I'll start. This one, as I was preparing to preach on mess this morning, all the stories didn't quite make it to the pulpit because so many of them involved poop. But I did have to share this funny one, which was from last week. I was trying to leave to go to a deacon's meeting, and my youngest was in the bath. And he goes, "Here go, Mama," and handed me something that he should not have been handing me. So that's my mess. TMI, but very relatable. Yeah.
Yeah, he knows how to share.
Here go, Mama.
Hi, my name is Liz, and wait, just name and mess. Okay.
And or something that draws you
Oh.
that you'd like to touch on tonight. Yeah.
Oh, my name is Liz, and my mess is, well, okay, seconds ago. I have a 10-month-old, a 12-year-old, and a 9-year-old. My 9-year-old is really not able to be independent at like self-care tasks or anything like that. So I was like getting her through the shower and just getting her up the stairs is incredibly difficult. And the 10-month-old was about to go into the bathtub, and the 12-year-old was not really eating her dinner downstairs and giving us a whole bunch of preteen attitude about it. So it was like mess in 3 different spaces. And then I ran out the door, so my husband has the mess now.
Good for you. Hi, I'm Laura. Just trying to think of a mess. It's a mess every day. I have a 15-year-old at home who is, she thinks she has it together, but she's a mess. We have a lot of battles. We have a really interesting relationship because we really have intense moments where we're like fighting about something, and then we are so tight and we're really, really good. So that's a mess for me because I just wish it was good all the time. But that's enough to share for now.
I'm Patrick. Mine is 21 years old. His room is a mess and has been for a very long time. But we decided, Eli and I decided, that it was his responsibility to adult and grow up, and how his room is his business. So, and also his laundry and his everything is all his work. So the thing that I'm actually attracted to is I have an aging mother who you would all say is a hoarder. It's just everything's piled up. You know, every flat surface has many layers deep, and you know the bill is here or under there or so forth. And it triggers me every time I see it. Every time I walk into her apartment, and so it always starts me on this sort of negative feeling. And I want to have a little bit of grace and understanding and acceptance, and maybe some appreciation for why she lives in a mess.
My name is Elizabeth, and I have 3 children, 13, almost 11, and 5. And I would say currently my messiest piece to navigate is that my new kindergartner is ready for dinner in bed between 4:30 and 6 at night because she's exhausted. And that's just as I'm launching my whole evening routine with my 2 boys. So navigating that, those hours is tricky.
That was really nice. Yeah, ditto. Rinse and repeat. My name is Alex. I have 4 kids. Let's do it. 12. Next week is going to be 9, 7, and 4. And the mess that I was walking and handing over to my spouse was all 6 of us were in the bathroom at the exact same time. I'm not sure exactly why or how that happened because we have plenty of bathroom spaces, but everybody just saw that I was trying to leave. Mm-hmm. And so, you know, Chris is shaving. I'm trying to put deodorant on. Natalia's getting out of the shower, completely nude. Andrew is pooping on the toilet. Vivian is sitting there going, like, she's arguing about what book she's going to read tonight. And Daniel is fixing his brand new haircut. So it was just like, and I was trying to just be like, I love that they want to be so close to me. But, So that's my mess.
My name is Jessica. I have 3 kids, twin boys who just turned 11 and a daughter who's 16. And, a perfect example of my mess is that I had to go do some work stuff in the corner before joining this conversation.
Hi, I'm Tom, and I'm trying to avoid a mess. I've got 3 kids. My son is 31 and getting married in about a month to a lovely Southern but conservative family. And how will I conduct myself with humility in such a, and my daughter Michaela works at Children's in pediatric oncology, and the other daughter is in Denver and a teacher.
My name is Sarah, and Whenever I see a Walmart store, I have a flashback to a day trip we took years ago when Anna, my daughter, and son, Ben, were maybe 3 and 4, and they both threw up in the car. And because it was a day trip, we didn't have any spare clothes. So we pulled into the nearest Walmart and bought them outfits.
I'm Anna, and I'm a preschool teacher, and my mess is dealing with 2-year-olds every day, all day. Crying kids, boogies, diapers, paint, you name it.
Well, I'm Dana, and I really came tonight out of curiosity to see what you would say about all of these things.
I'll do my best.
Okay.
Thank you. I'm Lynn, and I'm reminded on a Sunday evening. Back in the good old days, we actually had a housekeeping person that came every other Monday, and I would just lose it on Sunday nights trying to get ready for the clean.
Yes,
So at
yes,
one point, I remember being deep in this walk-in closet and tripping over something and just having a complete meltdown. So never, ever again would we ever have somebody help us clean our house on a Monday morning, ever, ever again. It ruined the whole weekend. Ever. They have to come Friday.
I'm Gina, and I'm an enthusiastic grandparent to a beautiful 2-year-old granddaughter and a grandson on the way. And I don't have a mess, but what drew me to the conversation is that our grandchildren's parents, our son and daughter-in-law, are excellent, amazing parents. I'm learning from them every time I see them, which is every Tuesday, because that's when I babysit. But they have no involvement with or interest in a church or a spiritual community. And I'm trying to tread lightly on this to just because I'd like to at least introduce our grandchildren to some of the concepts, without getting in the way. So I'm starting that thought process.
I'm Catherine, and I have a 13-year-old and a 15-year-old. And, I mean, there's so many messes. I was just thinking, I literally have so many that I can't even begin. But, like, the one thing I thought about was from the very beginning when my oldest was born, I had, like, such terrible postpartum depression. It was like carrying a bear around with me, as I always thought about it, like a grizzly, And but I couldn't be inside, so I would strap her to me and just walk all over town. And I always forgot diapers. I always forgot like anything to cover me up for like breastfeeding. It was, but like we had a good time, and I was not freaking out. So.
I'm Corey. I've been trying to I've been sorting like top 10 messes that I was thinking about maybe when it was my first time watching both kids at the same time, and my daughter, I just heard the sound of rain behind me, and my daughter was just emptying a whole bottle of vitamin D on the floor. And I was like, oh boy. And then the dog is like, ooh. And so I shut the dog out. The dog's barking. And then I have to turn the vacuum on. So there's a baby crying, a vacuum, a dog barking, and she's like, I guess I'll scream too. And but I'm not going to do that one. What drew me was the excerpt in the sermon today, as it was kind of going through this list of things that were just like, oh, that one. And so I'm in the sandwich generation, and my mom, she's 68, but she became completely disabled a couple of years ago due to a rare autoimmune condition. And so every Thursday, once a week, she comes over to our house, and I do caretaking for her and our now 1-year-old. And but we joke around a lot, and there's like a lot of really fun, tender moments. So one time I was wearing him in the front pack and trying to help her stand up and balance is an issue. So she kind of leaned too far forward and basically like bumped her head into the baby. And I was just like, could you please not headbutt my son? And she started giggling and laughing. And then she's just that age. She just started farting. And like couldn't stop. And so it just turned into both of us basically crying, laughing on the couch, kind of unable to move. And, in what was, can be an overwhelmingly heavy situation, it was kind of this little ray of light to that.
Hi, I'm Travis. I have a 12-year-old girl, Madeline, and Camden, who's 8, almost 9. I can almost kind of plan my messes ahead of time because whenever there's a test or a quiz, like tomorrow, Maddie gets kind of a little flustered, and there's a lot of calming down and coaching involved with that, especially around MCAS time. My son takes after me, so he's perfect. But no, he can cause some things. I think one time he told Madeline's friends who she had a crush on, and that was not a fun day. But overall, it's not too bad. Just definitely around testing times and things that have to get done, she gets overwhelmed with certain activities. And I inherited 12 messes this morning. I coach flag football, and I'm on my knees in the huddle. I look up. I got 8 kids looking at me with boogers coming down their face, and they want to go back to their dads and go home. So not too bad of a problem, but there you go.
Ellen, do you have a mess you want to share? No.
Oh,
No pressure.
gosh. Yeah, I mean, there's a million messes. A specific mess I want to share. Well, I think maybe because we'll talk a lot about this idea of being in control and the things we can't control. I went to visit my oldest, who's in school in Colorado, last weekend, and came home. Partly to visit him, also to go to a Brandi Carlile concert. You can figure out which one was first. But came home terribly sick, as Kit knows, and kind of had to surrender to that. And then yesterday, my youngest, who is 15, woke up with the congestion despite my having quarantined myself for the whole week and felt like I was completely out of things I completely forgot. I forgot he wanted to go to investment club on Tuesday morning, and it wasn't until like Wednesday night that I was like, wait, did he go to investment club? And my husband's like, yes, I took him to investment club because I was so out of it, just checked out because I didn't want to get anybody else sick. And of course he's gotten sick, and we're supposed to go, we leave on Friday to go back out to Colorado for family weekend. So I'm just, waiting for the third bout to hit my husband and what's going to happen there, but I'm not in control of it. So I'm not in control.
Well, we'll get there soon. In fact, let's get there soon. But maybe just a little bit about the genesis of this book, if you want to story tell a little. I've heard you and Molly describe it as a minister and a psychologist walk into a daycare. ... But yeah, tell us a little bit about how this got started.
Yeah. So the real genesis of my meeting Molly, I won't go too far back, but is that I grew up very Catholic. Catholic school from kindergarten through college. My mom actually was in the convent when she was in high school into college, but this was in the 60s, so she was really hopeful for, if anybody comes from Catholicism, that Vatican II was going to be this revolution in the church, and she was going to play a big role. And when that didn't pan out to be what she expected, she left just before taking her final vows. But part of the reason she left was I think she was very much always drawn to the Catholic worker movement. And so even though I grew up in an environment where there certainly was a conservative Catholic bent, I grew up quite liberal Catholic, Union Democrat family, and teachers, and emphasis on service and vocation, and questioning, and I was very, very close with my paternal grandmother, who I remember sitting at the kitchen table with her. She helped raise me when I was in 6th grade, and I was very precocious. And we were debating whether we thought hell existed, and would Hitler go there, and what. So it was a lot of questioning and room and all my growing up. But by the time we had our first child, who's now 21, this had followed on. I went to Boston College, so I had a front row seat to when the sex abuse scandal really came full circle in the church, and lots of questions around gay marriage and just kinds of things that I just felt maybe like my mom had felt many, many years before, like things were not progressing fast enough for me, and that I couldn't continue to kind of be a part of this institution that I had so many fundamental concerns about and with. And so I stopped going to church in my 20s, but then Luke came around, and I knew this had been such an important part of my growing up, having this kind of practice that made the faith and beliefs that my family had tangible to me. And I didn't know how I was going to I knew what my husband and I believed, I knew what we thought, but I didn't know how I was going to make that tangible to this baby and child, because I was also in graduate school for child psychology, and I knew enough about child development to know that for them to learn these things, they had to encounter them and get their hands on them, and how was I going to help him get his hands on faith or spirituality. So I started looking for a church that maybe could fit, and I had gone to a UU when I was a couple years before, but it wasn't a great experience. I kind of skipped over that, and I just started looking. And I found a webpage with a church with a rainbow flag and a woman minister. I was like, we'll try this one. It's down the street in Davis Square. And it was a hot, sweaty summer service in the basement. I had Luke in the sling, and we walked in, and Molly zoomed right. She had been there less than a year, and the congregation was dying, literally dying. I mean, the congregants were getting older and passing away, and the numbers were dwindling, and she was wanting to get young families in. So I think when she saw me, it was, let's get this, we gotta get this one, which she didn't have to do because we never checked out any of the other churches on my list after going to that service.
It's a fine balance between playing it cool and being like, hello, welcome.
Hello, welcome, stay, please come back next week and the week after that too. Would you teach Sunday school? Would you bring brownies? We actually started to become friendly, and our kids were 2 years apart, just about 2 years apart. Her older, and then her younger, who came later. And I needed daycare for Luke, and she told me about the family daycare her son went to, and so we signed him up, and we actually started carpooling together. And so the story, if you've read the book, is a lot about my showing up one morning to pick Rafe up to take him to daycare. And I think at that point, both Molly and Rafe were in tears when I walked in the front door, and Rafe had like half his clothes on and no socks and shoes, and it had been an all-out battle morning, and Molly was kind of at the end of her rope. And I was like, okay, well, first of all, just put his clothes in a bag and give me him and the bag, and at some point he'll put them on. I mean, if he gets cold, he'll put them on. Took him to school, and we just started talking more about parenting and kind of what we were each figuring out and trying to bring to it from the backgrounds that we came from. And even though I was kind of the child development psychology person for sure, and Molly more the spiritual faith person, we both had a little experience with the other. And I think what we realized was over a lot of cups of tea was like, we're talking about the same things, the same concepts, and these things just kind of get woven together in this way that makes sense. And the conversations continued for many years, and then Molly had written a couple of books, and she pitched this one without telling me. We talked about writing a book for a long time, but then she pitched it, and so then we wrote it. And it takes longer to write a book than you might think, especially when you've got kids at home. So then I think the book really gained from our having more time with our kids and in our careers to learn and grow. And I was saying now I think we probably could write the next volume because we're each in the sandwich generation. So, yeah.
Well, thank you for that little background. So I thought for the rest of our time that we would just kind of go through some of the major concepts and sort of topic by topic a little bit. And then we'll leave ample amount of time at the end for a sort of an open FAQ. That being said, it's a nice size circle here. And if there are things that come up as we're speaking, feel free to chime in or ask a question as we go. Does that sound good?
And with absolutely zero judgment, believe me, it doesn't matter to me. Can I ask how many people have read the book? Okay. Okay. Nope. Just
Nice.
asking
Good,
because,
right? Good recording, yeah.
Oh, yeah, listened. Oh, yeah. Listened or read. Listened totally counts. Yes. Nope, perfect. Thank you. More because I don't want to talk down. I don't want to be repeating myself or talking down. So, great.
Well, I'd love to share. So on page 21, this is kind of the intro to the overall structure around your two key parenting practices, which are, if anyone has their book, one, getting to know the child you've been given, and then letting go of fear and holding onto faith in order to parent that child into becoming the person God intends them to be. So I thought maybe we could talk a little bit about getting to know the child you've been given. And there's another passage around sort of the grain of the wood. Could you talk to us a little bit about temperament and how do we parent the child we've been given?
Yeah. So, I think most everyone who mentioned being a parent in the room said that they have more than one child. So I think if you have more than one child, then you know that, so there was this concept in psychology for a long time of the blank slate, this kind of assumption that a child is born a blank slate and meant for us to kind of instill in them what we will. And I think similarly, again, this is a good example of an early conversation that Molly and I had. I talked about the blank slate, and Molly talked more about the concept of original sin and spare the rod, spoil the child. That this idea from certain parts of Christianity that children are born into the world as sinners, to be disciplined, to be molded, to be taught, to be shaped.
The baggage of a certain interpretation of Christianity.
Exactly. And we know from science that the blank slate is not true. And I think many of us believe from our faith in Christianity that nor is this concept of original sin and the job of a parent being to spare the rod or spoil the child doesn't ring true either. And in fact, what we know from child development literature is that babies, people, we all have temperaments. And we all have personalities. No one is born with a fully formed personality, but we certainly are born with ways of kind of reacting to or responding to the world that might be a little bit different from the person next to us. And so there's lots of theories of temperament, but the one that I was studied and actually did some research in and really kind of find most compelling is this concept of kind of a range from a low to a high reactive baby or person or temperament. So a low reactive baby, all babies startle at loud noises, but the low reactive baby might just kind of jump a little, and look around, what was that? And they might sit for hours in a wet diaper and you don't even realize it until it's time to change them. They're just kind of copacetic. Now that has its pros and cons. There's no better or worse here when we talk about temperament. There's pros and cons to that. Sometimes those babies grow up to be a bit of thrill seekers. In order to get their dopamine going, they need more stimulus. So maybe they're going to be more of your risk taker. So it's not necessarily a good or bad thing. It's just they're not quite as reactive. And then other babies who are very high reactive, a pin could drop and they will start screaming bloody murder. You will know as soon as their diaper is wet or they are uncomfortable in any way, shape, or form. You might not even be able to figure out why they're uncomfortable in any way, shape, or form, but they're going to freak out. And again, not good or bad. They're very perceptive. They're very tuned in. They're going to notice things that other people aren't going to notice as they get older. And the research tells us that those high reactive babies are, and there's everything in between. It's a spectrum, it's a continuum. Those high reactive babies are going to maybe more likely to grow up as anxious kids, except they can learn skills and tools to cope with their reactivity and their emotions. So that it's really interesting stuff where, like, if you put them in an MRI and stimulate them, they will still react internally, but they may not react externally anymore because they might have learned skills to kind of manage. So we all kind of come into the world in these somewhere on this spectrum, and we're probably on lots of spectrums. And so I think, again, you'll know, I literally knew night one after having my second. Long story short is that I sent him to the nursery at 10 p.m., woke up at 5 a.m. and called the nurse, and I was like, and she came in, and I was like, what's wrong? She's like, what do you mean what's wrong? You called me. I'm like, what's wrong? She's like, what? I'm like, where's the baby? What happened? What's wrong? Why isn't he? What happened? Like, where's the baby? It's 5 a.m. I think I sent him at 10 p.m. What? She's like, it's okay. Like, he doesn't need to nurse the first night. Like, I can go check on him if you want, but, like, it's fine. And I'm like, you better go check on him. Like, the whole thing was just I was so confused, so foreign to me, because night one with my first, he wouldn't latch. We couldn't. Sent him to the nursery. 10 minutes later, we heard him coming down the hallway screaming to come back. Like, tried to settle him down, tried to send him back. Nope, half hour later, heard him screaming down the hall. Like, just completely different kids from night one right out of the gate. Now, I don't think we need to, like, reify anything or get too hardcore at it. I mean, they are a lot alike in a lot of ways now at 15 and 21. But temperamentally, they're a little different. And that's not necessarily in our control. They all have different interests. They have different ideas. They just different ways of interacting with the world. And so this concept of kind of going with the grain is a different reading or interpretation of that spare the rod, spoil the child. Maybe you want to read about that a little?
Yeah, maybe we could find that
Yeah.
one. Maybe as we're finding that, if anyone has a thought about temperament in your own context.
Yes. Yeah. 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 Another idea of temperament is like there's the NEO or the 5-factor personality, and one dimension of that is introversion to extroversion. It's definitely related. Yeah.
Here we go. It's on 23.
Yep.
I'll let you read it since it's,
Sure.
So it's
Thank you.
starting with a quote from the book of Proverbs, which is, train children in the right way, and when they grow, they will not stray. And so they open up. What could that mean? It's a creative biblical interpretation of what does it mean to train children in the right way?
Yep. And so, and again, this comes from Molly, but the original Hebrew suggests that in the right way actually hews more closely to according to their own nature and temperament, akin to going along with the grain of wood rather than working against it.
I love that. And so I have a question about temperament, and because there's a lot of families with multiple kids. I love this idea of attuning and adapting and failing forward is a phrase you both used, to try to adapt our parenting to match those kids and to meet them as they are. And you talked about temperament versus personality, and like the temptation to put a kid in a box, or maybe to say, well, this kid is this way and that kid is that way, and I know there's no good can come from the comparison piece, and I'm curious about how to hold that tension between both acknowledging, personalizing, but wanting to be surprised by them too, and letting them continue to grow. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know if this answers that exactly, but I think because it's hard for us not to. I mean, if we're supposed to kind of train them in their own way, that also means we're supposed to understand them and get to know them. So how do we understand them and get to know them if we're not allowed to label them? And now this gets into like, okay, the many parenting books that are out there, and way too much talk about the right way to do this. There's no right way. We are all doing the best we can. I think for me, a lot comes down to language. I noticed you earlier, somebody said something but, and you said but and. That's my favorite,
Did I even?
Yeah, yeah. But it's my favorite. I tell
funny.
all my
Yeah.
all the time, like anytime you can, if you can try and change a but to an and.
It's like my life philosophy.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Or it's really sad and it's really funny, like, because it's both. It's both and. So I'm big on language, and I think one way we can do this is to describe behaviors and thoughts and preferences instead of labeling people. So it's not necessarily, like we used to call my oldest our 0 to 60 baby. We didn't call him difficult. Was he difficult? Maybe. At times I found him difficult, but he's not a difficult person.
Yes.
But he was 0 to 60. He'd be perfectly content, and then all of a sudden he'd be freaking out, and that was just the way he reacted to things. And
Difficult is our experience.
exactly,
Right.
exactly. But the behavior that was sometimes difficult for me was not knowing what triggered him to go from 0 to 60. But it wasn't that he was trying to be difficult or upset me or provoke me. And so if we could just sort of observe that, then we know. And sometimes just knowing what to expect can be really helpful.
That is helpful. And I love that. I think maybe we get afraid we don't want to label, but language is important, and it is part of the process of getting to know someone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or I know a lot of people have teenagers, so people might have teenagers who, one of the phrases we would use in play therapy if we're kind of observing somebody, it says, seems like you're the kind of kid who, and some of you might have, seems like, you're the kind of kid who has a hard time making decisions. What can we do to help you with that, right? Or you're the kind of kid who, once you make a decision, it's really hard to admit that maybe you were wrong. I've noticed that about you. Does that kind of ring true? Like, just noticing things, and we can use.
I like that, and then asking them.
You would hide it? Oh, yeah. I'm super direct with kids. Also because they already know. I have one of my fundamental philosophies of adults. So first of all, I should say, I think I have it in here somewhere, like I would rather spend my day with a 5 or a 15-year-old anytime than a 50-year-old. Sorry. I'm not that interested in adults. We're too cooked to change. We're not all that interesting to me. But kids, one of my biggest pet peeves is that I think adults in general underestimate children and teenagers. I think that every kid, I work a lot with kids with medical illness and injury. They can understand incredibly complex conditions and topics and things if it's presented to them in a way that they can understand depending on their developmental level. And again, 9 times out of 10, they already know. They already know. And they know the bad stuff too. They know the really scary stuff. A lot of my job at Shriners is sort of supporting parents and people to tell kids when really awful things have happened that they might not be aware of. So maybe an accident that injured them resulted in the death of a parent or a loved one. And there's often so much hesitation around telling them they're going to be upset. It's going to set them back. It's not going to be good for them. We want to protect them. And I, of course, understand that impulse. But the fact is that 9 times out of 10, they already know. And then if they're left to think that on their own, that's not super helpful. They need somebody there with them. So also even things like, and again, this depends a little on temperament, but in my private practice, I mostly do testing for learning disabilities. And I'll talk about with parents, ways we can talk with your child about their learning style. Because they already know that they're struggling in math, but they don't know why.
Yeah.
Maybe they think it's because they're stupid. And if we can explain to them, no, it's because your brain is really, really good at words and your brain is not so good at shapes and numbers. And that's just the way brains work, and here's what we can do and what your parents can do to help you. That's empowering for them to understand it. So yeah, I definitely name things a lot.
Well, and I love the way you also framed it as, how does that ring true for you? Like inviting them in to also naming.
Because we could
Yeah,
be
and
wrong,
affirming, right, right.
definitely.
You
can be wrong.
named some of the hard stuff of life too, and so that second part of your sort of two grounding parenting practices: first, getting to know the child you've been given, and the second, letting go of fear and holding on to faith. And there's the kind of the marriage with the faith piece. Maybe we could just talk a little bit about fear and worry, which comes back in the last chapter. But there's a lot going on in the world right now, so I feel like I want to make sure we have time and space to reflect on that together well. Let's talk a little bit about fear and control. Yeah.
So one of the basic concepts of the book comes from self-determination theory, and a theory of parenting that goes along with it. And this is this goes back to my roots as a psychologist. Self-determination theory is a motivational theory, so it's basically about what drives people to thrive, what drives people to succeed, to be well. And it kind of posits that we all have needs for autonomy, not independence, but autonomy. We need to feel in control and like we have a sense of choice and in our lives and volition, and that we're doing things because they're important to us or important to people who are important to us. And we need to have a sense of competence, that we know if we do A, B will happen. And then the third is a need for relatedness. We need to feel connected to other people, just as human beings. And so the way that we can meet children's three needs, or other people could meet our three needs, is by providing them with autonomy support or choice, volition. Structure gives a sense of competence. So that's the second kind of pillar. And then the third is by being involved and knowing them, knowing their lives, knowing what's going on. That meets their needs for relatedness. There's a good amount of research that suggests autonomy support is probably the most important. If we had to, I mean, you need all three, but it's really important for a sense of intrinsic motivation and identified motivation and all kinds of
More
good
than
things.
relatedness? Whoa. That's.
I mean, in
Yeah,
combination.
maybe. Yeah,
in combination,
yeah. Yeah.
So, I mean, not to get super dark and hard, but I mean, because even kids who are in really toxic, abusive situations where they have no autonomy can feel very attached to a parental caregiver or figure, because that need for relatedness is being met, but other needs aren't being met. So it's absolutely key to have all of these needs met. So the
Freedom.
opposite of
the
autonomy,
theological concept I would be like freedom,
free will,
love and freedom. Yeah,
it's really love and freedom, love and free will.
Yeah.
It's really free will. It's not freedom. You know, when I think of freedom, well, I guess it's freedom, but
that's
it's,
up here. What we're talking about.
yeah, and a sense of control. The opposite of autonomy support is control. The thing is, when we're scared, we tend to become more controlling. So that's where I'm kind of looping back to fear. And there is a lot to be afraid of, and we feel afraid when we don't feel in control.
Right.
I think that's something I mentioned in my notes to you that I've started to think about a lot in recent years since writing the book, is about parents' needs for autonomy support, relatedness, and competence.
Yes.
And if we don't feel like we can keep our kids safe, if we don't feel like we're in control of what happens to them, or grandchildren, or you name it, then we're going to be inclined to be more controlling. We're going to want to hold them close and keep those reins really tight, psychologically and emotionally, as well as physically. And so I think that's really the challenge for a lot of us, is how do we kind of manage our own fears and worry, so that we don't deny them the need for autonomy. And I think that, this kind of ties in. There's a lot of talk about, from kind of like the free range parenting movement and things like this, that, our kids have been kind of over controlled for the past couple of decades in many ways. They don't have the same kind of freedoms that a lot of us grew up with, that maybe is detrimental that they don't have those.
and spaces, to explore and become.
Yeah.
I love the description of faith communities, and summer camp was another one that gets a shout out as places where they can encounter school, of course, too, but places where they can encounter, sometimes the very same values you've been telling. I love the anecdote about teaching the relaxation exercises. Was that?
Oh, yeah.
one of-
Like, it doesn't work if it comes from you.
your parent.
No,
Yeah,
no.
but then
My youngest, when he was in like 3rd grade, came home and they had like open circle, like emotion support time or whatever, and it was bedtime. And he was like, "Oh, Mom, I've got to show you this thing I learned in school today because it'd be really helpful for your kids, like your patients." He calls them. They used to call my patients my kids, your kids. My kids telling me what to do for my other kids. And he was like, let me show you. And it was like this deep breathing. I was progressive muscle relaxation. I was like, I've been doing that with you since you were 3. Okay, yes, yeah, that's a really cool tool. Thanks for teaching me that. But, it doesn't sink in coming from you. So
Right.
being in those other spaces can be really helpful. But yeah, I want to acknowledge, though, I was thinking a lot about this week in particular because, on one day we had a shooting on a college campus and a shooting in a high school.
Yeah.
And on that day I had a kid on a college campus and a kid in a high school. And those are supposed to be safe spaces where they can be on their own and experimenting and exercising their autonomy. So it is, I think, really, really hard right now.
Yes. The sort of the quote that's referenced that we hear a lot about parenting, the foundational piece of parenting being or having a child like watching your heart walk around outside of your body, and the risk of letting your kid out into an often unsafe world. But I like that you use the word need, and that to not provide the need of autonomy is also it's a neglect, actually.
Well, and I think that's where then we also can rely on our own faith.
Yes.
And I think that you had noted this to come up somewhere too. Not that I don't know that I personally believe that my God can protect my children in some kind of active way. I have a hard time with that too, because why should he protect my children and
Right.
not
Yeah.
somebody else's child? And I equally don't think that everything happens for a reason. I know we're recording. I think that's bullshit. Theology and philosophy. But I do think that meaning can be found everywhere. And that, for me personally, that's God. So it's finding that meaning and that connection even in the worst of things. So that's just what I rely on to allow me to not parent from a place of fear, is so in that moment to think about, okay, I'm scared right now, like who can I rely on? Who can I lean on? What can my faith give me to help me respond in a helpful way in this moment?
I was thinking about faith in this context specifically, and how sort of my definition, understanding what's the difference between faith and sort of like non-anxious tool. And obviously there's a huge overlap, I think, from like specific practices to how I conceptualize it. I guess for me, faith, whether or not you have a sense of a God, so like sort of a personal God, or faith for me connotes relationship, whether it's of some
Yes.
kind, and that can also be relationship in community. But it's certainly related to how do you maintain specific non-anxious, non-reactivity.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think a lot of God is being in that space in between. And sometimes we got to make that space bigger to fill it up with more God, and that's okay too. But it can be hard to do that because we want to be God. We want to control. If we keep them close, we keep them safe. They don't leave the house. Nothing bad will happen. But we're not God, so we've got to give them space and let God fill that space. It's not her quote; it's variation on it. But Molly will often say, I don't think she says necessarily that everything will be like things will be okay in the end. If they're not okay, it's not the end yet. So we've got to work through and find those moments where we're at. And I think that's a lot of the mess, right? It's like in any given moment that everybody described, not everything is okay. There's no moment where everything is okay. Very rarely. But if we kind of give it space, give it time, then we can keep working that out.
There's a quote in chapter 10 about the difference between worry and prayer.
Yeah.
I guess we don't need necessarily the same to find the actual passage, but I guess, framing that as, I think Anne Lamott says, like, prayer is worry that it says it's prayers or something, whereas worry is praying for what you don't want, which I like. There's so much. If we had more time, we could do a part 2. I love a lot of the piece about rituals and routines, Sabbath. There's all the stuff about sex and money is so great. I also just want to open up for, please, yeah, go for it.
I'm curious how you would, and I think the 2-year point of you prefer to work with children, which I understand. From the parenting perspective, in this climate of either fear of sending our kids into the world because it doesn't quite feel safe, or because of the pressures in areas like this where you feel like, am I doing enough to provide all the opportunities for my child rather than listening to the noise? Am I just listening to what they want? Do you have advice on finding, if there is one, the quiet to ensure you're allowing your child to kind of show you their path rather than over worry yourself and your family to create a path for them?
Yeah, we're also under a lot of pressure to do things right or to give them all the right things, or I think that's a lot of what you're getting at too. So this actually, I think, is another kind of core piece of what brought me and Molly together, is that I think that so many of the words I'm about to use have become kind of been co-opted and mean certain things, but they're words and they are concepts and they're important. So I think so much of it comes back to values, and values are really core to faith and to spirituality. It's sort of, what do you hold in high regard? What guides your decisions? What guides your behaviors? What guides your choices? And what I think, if we can all step back and have that moment of quiet, what we really want our children to get from us, or to learn from us, or absorb from us, from no matter their age, is we want them to share what we think is important. Not necessarily do as I say, or make this choice, or go to that school, or play that sport. We want them to value what we value. And sometimes recognizing that that might look a little different than we expect it to also.
I really appreciated, there was a one section, I forget which chapter, about kids think we want them to be happy when really we want them to be kind.
Right.
Although I think sometimes we do want them to be happy.
Yeah, but I think a little bit at their expense currently. I think we're too worried about them being happy and comfortable and okay and having all the things, because in fact that's not what builds the muscle of resilience. We found some really interesting stuff, and if you go to the pediatrician and you've had to do those checklists for your kids, one of those was created at MGH, and they added this little resilience scale, and we were piloting it. So we were giving that checklist to parents of kids in different clinics, and we were giving it to parents of kids in the psychiatry clinic, in general pediatrics, and then in my diabetes clinic, type 1 diabetes clinic. on that resilience scale, perhaps not surprisingly, the kids who were in psychiatry were kind of on average rated as lowest on resilience. But maybe a little surprisingly, the kids in general pediatrics and diabetes clinic were not equal. The parents of the kids in diabetes clinic rated their children as higher on resilience because they'd had to be more resilient, because they'd faced certain challenges. And guess what? They rose to those challenges. So I think we they don't develop that, we don't meet their need for competence to feel in control if we just give them what they want all the time or smooth the path, or we talk about it in the book as like this, because we're from the Northeast, like the snowplow parenting, where you're just clearing the path and making it easy. And I think if we can go back again to our values, then that can really help kind of guide us. I tell the story, one of my favorite stories that I tell in the book is about when my oldest, in college now, was in 6th grade, and he came home and he had failed this early in the year science quiz. And I was like, what happened? And he's like, stupid quiz. Teacher wanted us to know her email address. Why do I need to know her email address? It auto-populates when I go into email. It was a dumb quiz. It was like on classroom policies. And I was like, okay, but like you failed, and she said you can take it over, retake it tomorrow. So you're going to retake it? And he's like, no. He's like, it was a dumb quiz, Mom. And I was like, yeah, but you failed. You can retake it. You can get a better grade. And he's like, yeah, but I'll have to do it during lunch, and I don't want to miss lunch with my friends. And I was like, okay. I'm like, all right, well, here's the choice. I was like, if you're not going to retake the quiz tomorrow, then you're going to have to hand your phone and screens over tonight, because, you could either be studying for the quiz tonight and retake it tomorrow and bring your grade up, or you're going to hand over your phone and, read or do something if you're going to not take that quiz tomorrow. Okay, all right, that's your choice? It's like, yep. Like, okay, great. And I leave, and I'm like, didn't work, damn it. How did I get this wrong? And I just could not, and again, I say it like it is, so I went back in his room after, and I was like, bud, I just got to say, I was really hoping you were going to make a different choice. And he's like, yeah, I know, Mom. I know you were. I know you. They called me I was a try-hard. I went for the A every time. And I kind of left, and I was like, okay, he knows my values are to do well in school, respect your teachers, get good grades. It's not that he doesn't share those values, but then he also shares the value of being with people he cares about and his friendships and downtime and relaxation. And that value was more important to him in the moment than a stupid quiz on the classroom policies. I think he would have made a different choice if it had been an actual test. And I was like, okay, that's the way it was supposed to go. I did do it right. But doing it right doesn't mean they always choose what we want them to choose, because that's not actually true autonomy support either.
And I'm drawn, Elizabeth, by your question about getting quiet and time. Also, I think so much of what I was thinking about, the obstacles to autonomy support, personally and just in our culture, being that it just takes so much longer to let them do it themselves, whether it's, from the first turning on the faucet to wash their hands, or, all the way through. And it is sort of a time sickness and a time scarcity that is for our whole culture, regardless of age. And I do think that's where the rhythms of Sabbath and the practices of stopping, that's our sacred traditions, teach us over and over again, because we need to hear it again and again, can offer.
Yeah, definitely. Even saying, I think I heard about flag football on Sunday mornings. I don't know why flag football is always on Sunday mornings, right? And there might be a time where you say, you know what, we're not going to flag football today. We're going to go to church because something's happening there that's really important to us. And, and when you get older, you can make your own choices, but right now that's what's important to mom and dad, or mom and dad and dad. That's important to us. And I think, we wrote the book before the pandemic, and then it kind of turned into, we were like, oh, is this really, when we mentioned in chaotic times, chaotic world, we were not anticipating 2020. Literally, I think this came out in 2019. We were not anticipating 2020 or 2025 or any of this. But I think it has held up, and I think it also, COVID, I think, gave a lot of families and a lot of people permission to start saying no, which also speaks to like giving into all these pressures. We're so afraid to say no, and no is not, it's not necessarily undermining autonomy support. No could be no to that. That is not an option. You still have these choices. I'm not telling you what to do, but I am telling you that one isn't a choice. That isn't an option, and here's why. That's the other thing I think in terms of like important to say why and what's important to you. I kind of want to go to this question too of grandparenting.
Yeah, please, let's.
Because I think it ties in here too, like this. I love that you're not wanting to pressure. I think you said it's your son and daughter-in-law, and you don't want them to think that they're like doing anything wrong or missing anything at all. But I think there's a way in which you can say, hey, this is why this is important to me. This was why it was important to me as a mom and raising you, like what I got out of having a church community or faith, and I don't know what you got out of it. Did you get, and have that kind of conversation. And then just say, it's just something to think about. And like, if you guys would be okay with it, I'd be happy to take them sometime to our church if you wanted me to, or if you want, like, whatever. I just want to put it out there to have you think about it just because it was so important to me as a parent. I really felt like it was helpful to me as a parent. I think, so one of the phrases I try to encourage avoiding, whether parenting, grandparenting, any age, is say you need to do X, Y, and Z. You need to clean up your room. Nope, actually they don't need to. They do not need to. They have no interest. Yep. Call your bluff. It's I need you to, right? And to even say that, like, there's a limit. I understand you are not interested in making your bed. I do need you to take those cereal bowls into the kitchen and put them in the sink because they're gonna start attracting mice, and we know the mice keep us up at night. So can we please put the cereal bowls in the sink? But I need you to do that. So to talk about our needs and our motivation and things that have helped us can be really, really helpful and powerful to our kids. I mean, sometimes my kids roll their eyes at me when I'm like, well, when I was this age, it was really helpful to me, and I need we know, Mom, we know. We know all about your childhood. Stop being such a psychologist. That's the other one I get. Stop being such a psychologist right now.
I was just thinking a little bit, someone asked Freud, he had a difficult job hearing all these problems and complaints. And he said, well, it's not really that bad. There's a lot tougher jobs. And because like what? He said, like being a great teacher or being a parent. So I find that you're all here. You're doing a good job.
Yes.
To be compassionate to yourself. And I was just thinking about the ratio with couples. I like math. So in a couple's relation, 5 positive to every negative, you've got a great relationship.
Yes.
So I'm still working with my kids and myself with a 3 or 4.
Yep.
But I'm trying to be more positive and to regulate my own emotions. I like the mantra. So one comes from stress inoculation, not just parenting star, I call it. And that might be, I sort of sense in the body where I'm tight or tense, my shoulders or my heart racing. And then T, think about my self-talk, and if it's really negative and awfulizing, like I said, I really blew that. I instruct myself to put something more neutral. And then R, calm myself down with a few deep breaths, the parasympathetic response, and then reward myself, because the culture is not rewarding parents. So, and the last thing I would think is the 3 words, never worry alone. So I think that's what KID is doing, and just trying to get us to share the complexity of what it is that you're all doing pretty well.
I love that. We talk a lot about good enough parenting, and comes from one of my favorite developmental psychologists, Haim Ginott, really coined the concept of the good enough mother. And that there are, when we talk about these needs, these are basic needs, they're actually not that hard to meet if you're doing it 3 out of 5 times. That's okay. Exactly. And breath. And again, this like spiritual and science, you
Yes.
know, in Christianity, in our faith, the Holy Spirit is breath. It's wind, it's air. And so taking that moment to breathe in, if you are a person of faith, the Holy Spirit, and asking breath and centeredness to guide you, or quiet, or what is important to me in this moment. What am I trying to teach? What's centering me, and how can that kind of guide the choices I'm going to offer?
And to offer, forgiveness, and to ask for it back.
Yes,
There was
we're big on apologizing.
Yeah, there was a passage in there about we're not peers, but we are equals in the eyes of God with our children. And I thought that was such a powerful statement and sort of framing around, repair, but also dignity and mutual respect, and a sense of coming alongside our kids. I want to make sure we have time for other questions. So if there are things that already came up that ignite a spark, or if there are questions around the circle. Alex.
Well, sorry. There are people.
It's too late for this. It's too late for me with the microphone. So I have 4 kids, and I know I like the passage about going with the grain of the wood. I guess my question is, in a family, especially a larger family, how did you negotiate the individual child within the boundary of the family and staying connected to sort of, again, we are very big on values every year. We talk about what are our 3 values for the year that we're going to make decisions around, and we all sort of can vote on them, and we kind of do this in a sort of democratic way.
I love it.
Sort of.
We talk about making a family mission statement. You do it every year. That's awesome.
We try, because it changes, right? Like it changes, right? So my question is always how to negotiate the needs of the family as a unit versus the child as an individual, and when does one trump the other? Because they often are at odds. And that kind of goes to, I think, to your point too, is sort of, for the family, it's nice to have them all together for dinner. That's like really valuable and like important for us. But maybe for the child, that going to that extra soccer practice or whatever is very valuable and meets their needs in a different way. So if you can speak a little bit, that would be awesome.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think there's so many aspects to that. I think just like a very concrete, kind of simple one is, I think, always just checking in to make sure, if you do have one child who's like, no, I can't do dinner, like I have to do club soccer practice on Tuesday nights or whatever, just help me understand why you have to do it, right? So if the why is because I will be left out, or I'm scared of the coach, or like, I don't know, something that is like, that actually sounds kind of not great for your mental health or physical health or well-being, like it's not being driven by a value, then maybe we're still going to say family dinner is more important. But if they're like, I love this team, this coach is great, I feel like I'm playing the best I've ever played, I like this team better than school team, like it's super important to me, then like, okay, like this sounds like it's really important to you and in line with our values, like maybe we got to make this work. And that does kind of supersede the value of the family having dinner together on Tuesday night, because we can have it together on another night. I mean, also one of my favorite phrases is, please don't let perfect be the enemy of the good. Like, we quote the Family Dinner Project, which is a really cool project if anybody wants to look it up online, by a colleague of mine that has done all this research on the power of family dinners and family meals. And like, but Dr. Fischel, who does it, she'll tell you, like, it doesn't have to be dinner. It can be breakfast, it can be a snack, it can be lunch, it can be Sunday morning bagels that we do every week. Like, it doesn't have to be dinner. So don't let perfect be the enemy of the good. But I also think, especially in a big family, like developmentally, kids are very interested in fairness. It's not fair. And we hear so much about what's fair and not fair. And you might even hear it from adult kids, right? Like, it's not fair that they got this or that and I didn't. And I think what I've always said and remind people is like fair actually means giving each person what they need when they need it. It doesn't mean giving each person the exact same thing.
There's a great parable about that with the day laborers going out, and then at the end of the day, and some go out at 7 a.m., some go out throughout the day, and then they come back, and then there's a lot of grumbling because they all got paid the same wage, but some people only worked an hour and some people worked all day. But there's the same message that, there's enough grace and meeting of needs. If everyone's needs are met, then fairness can have a different application or a different context. And I do think the mini community that is the family, makes us have to flex and dance with that tension.
Yeah. And I think also we don't want to, of course we want to be careful about not worrying or overburdening or scaring our kids, but sometimes to say, well, we were doing the best we could at the time, or this was that, or I've just had a long conversation with my boys this summer. We spent a lot of time together this summer for various reasons, and we started talking for some reason about all the babysitters they had growing up and like who we liked and didn't like and all this stuff. And it kind of brought up that for my older one was a sophomore in high school when COVID hit. So I spent a lot of time with him home when he was a baby that he doesn't really remember. But then, he was always with babysitters, nannies, whatever. And then COVID hits, and now I work from home a lot more. And now his younger brother, I drive him to school every day. And I'm there when he gets home at the end of the day. And it's different. And I think he resents that a little bit. And honestly, I think he kind of should. Like, I think I would too if I was him. And I feel bad about it. I do feel bad about it. And I told, like I said, I feel kind of bad. And I felt kind of, but when we had this conversation, like my husband and I said, yeah, like we were just doing the best we could and what we had to do at the time. Like at the time, I didn't have a choice but to be in the hospital all those days a week, or Dad had to be in the, like that's the way things were. And we were doing the best we could at the time, and we're doing the best we can now. And yeah, I can see how you'd feel that way. So to kind of acknowledge, like, yeah, I can see how you would feel like that's not fair. Yep. I don't know if that helps.
Yes. It's a memorable one. Yeah. Oh, it leaves a bad I know, you're like, but that can't be. Yeah, I know. Right. I think what it gets at, too, is sort of that we can make an idol of fairness, I think. Like, well, now I'm getting kind of exegesis, but, like, in the story, you don't know why the person didn't get out to work till the last hour of the day. Like, maybe they couldn't. Maybe they had some challenges, or they couldn't find work until, you can apply it to society in all kinds of ways, but there are all kinds of things that, hold us back, but it's a toughie.
I think it also ties in, and we talk about this in the book too, about like black and white thinking, like either or. It's fair or it's not, right? Yeah. We get paid for the work or we don't. Like, and it's all this either or black and white thinking. And honestly, I think it goes back to the both and it goes back to like I'm not going to have easy answers for you because it's messy.
Right.
But I think it's better if it's messy. I think it's better if we're wrestling with the mess and figuring it out, because when we get into this black and white thinking, it is the root of a lot of conflict and a lot of really, I think it's really the root of a lot of what's happening right now in our public discourse. It's like right and wrong, who's in and out, it's this or it's that. And exactly, like we don't know the context of, maybe that story is about unionization and like workers' rights and having sick time and paid leave and time off, because it's complicated and one day isn't going to look like the next day. And it all kind of balances out in the end. I think that's the other kind of principle or idea that we try to instill too is like, if we are doing the best we can and trying to give each person what they need when they need it, then ideally it does kind of all come out in the wash in the end, right? It might not be exactly equal and fair today, but over the course of our life as a family, it will be.
So my son's really into geopolitics and the news, and you kind of just mentioned it a little bit right now. But how do we guard against like uninvited or mess coming into our homes from outside chaos?
Really good question. We can't, sadly, unfortunately. I mean, not unless I think we could resort to controlling. We could resort to trying to control the information that comes in and out and saying you can't listen to this or can't do that. And there are limits. There have to be certain limits, of course, on what kids listen to and see. But I think actually, I mean, we also can't prevent what families they marry into or what, I mean, there's a lot that's not in our control. I will say that, you know, a lot of what we're learning genuinely from the psychological science and really studying kids with social media, et cetera, is that less so, sure, put the basic safeguards on things, but much more important is know what they're watching, what they're reading, what they're listening to, talk to them about it so that you can be there to provide the alternate viewpoint. I mean, that is the other problem with everything right now. I mean, you talk about, right, like when Molly and I were writing the book, we were taking a walk around Walden Pond, and I was telling her my parents were going on all these Viking cruises at the time. And then, you know, she took her phone out to do something, and she was like, why the hell is my phone advertising Viking cruises to me? Like, the algorithms are feeding us what we want to hear. AI is programmed to validate you and tell you what you want to hear. The kids are being fed algorithms. So they are only going to get more and more and more of what they're looking up. And if you don't know what they're looking up and what they're reading and hearing and talking about and aren't there to provide credible sources of alternative perspectives and other ideas and other viewpoints, it's just going to get reified. So it's more important to know kind of what they're reading and what they're thinking. And I actually think it goes both ways. I think, you know, if you're very, I mean, I'm kind of assuming a more liberal bent here, but liberals are being fed by algorithms too, and we risk kind of reifying certain things. So actually my 15-year-old came home the day of the Charlie Kirk shooting and said, some political guy got shot, my friends are talking about it, like, what's going on? Like, and he said, you know it sounds like he believed in a lot of things that I don't believe in, but like, nobody deserves to be shot for like talking on a college campus and trying to, and I was like, 100%, bud. Yep, 100%. And this is the reason a lot of people actually like him and support him, because he did do X, Y, and Z. And these are the reasons that I don't agree with him. And there's there's 5 sides to every story. But I think that's really the way. I think too, I can divulge enough, like Molly probably dealt with this, I think, even more like head to head than I did. But, you know, I think there's going to be a natural inclination for some kids temperamentally to rebel. And so they're going to know what you're all about, and they're going to want to do the opposite, at least for a little while. And I think to the extent that they can be allowed to do that safely, they have to be allowed to do that safely. And again, we can't control the outcome, and they may believe different things, they may go down a different path. But honestly, for a lot of kids that do stay in relationship to parents who are providing autonomy, support, and involvement in structure, they end up kind of coming around on the other side.
Something just clicked about one of my kids' temperaments.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. She likes to occasionally sleep with her head at the feet of the bed.
Uh-huh.
Just because she wants to do it.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yep. I mean, and there are kids, there's actually this parenting kind of philosophy out of Great Britain that's about for kids who are kind of on the autism spectrum, but I know a lot of parents who found it really, really helpful for parents who have kids who temperamentally, their first response is no. No, they don't even think through what they're saying no to. Their first response is just no. And so you have to communicate with them a little bit differently. You really can't even give a choice or a yes. You can't ask yes or no questions because, or sometimes you can't even give choices. You know, do you want this or do you want that? No. Like, okay, we've got to kind of approach this differently.
This was like the first week where I didn't mind really driving the kids to school. Usually I'm in favor of the buses, but Lincoln Elementary is K through 8. And after the terrific news this week, glad that the kids are not on the bus hearing from the 8th graders and older kids. Just, I'm sure they hear it. They have access to phones and things. And so, yeah, it makes sense.
Well, and also I think finding any of those moments, like, you know, we talk about this a lot in the book too, about kids, like, especially boys, finding places and times when you're not making eye contact to have conversations. So walking the dog or taking a bike ride or a hike or in the car, lots of stuff happens then. Also, yes, just try to be prepared for bedtime. Like, maybe move it a little earlier because as soon as like their, you know, frontal lobes start to like settle and they're not so trying to be busy and like settle in, all of a sudden certain kids are going to have a lot to talk about at bedtime. It's a quiet time.
There was a movie I saw recently, Social Dilemma, about 5 years ago. About things that tech leaders who basically said they're creating addiction now.
Yeah.
And it's subtle, it's powerful.
Right.
You've got the best psychologists and engineers. Might be something you watch.
I've heard of it.
With your teenagers. They basically said 13 to 15-year-olds that aren't even have a cell phone. Sure.
Yeah. Well, and a lot of the kids, but letting the kids see it, right, exactly, like to tell them you're being marketed to, just the way like we were shown Joe the Camel, you know, to get us on. And same thing like with vaping, like they were marketed to. They were marketed to, and now they're on Zyn because they all got hooked on vaping, and now like it's, you know, but to educate them about that, like don't, you know, you are being manipulated. Nobody likes to be manipulated. So to learn, to realize you're being manipulated, that's pretty powerful. And so a lot of them are kind of like eschewing it and like, oh, I'm going to go to a flip phone. And also observational studies show in most families, you know who's spending the most time on screens? Mom and dad.
Yeah.
Because we're rats too.
To your point, Travis, I had a conversation with my 20-year-old the other day, and we were talking about the shooting, and she was like, "Oh my gosh, it's a conspiracy," and she was sending me all these reels on Instagram, and I was like, "How did you find these things? You know, like why are these, you know, tons of them," and she's like, "Oh, they're just coming up on my feed." Because I was exploring it, you know, and then they just kept coming and kept coming. So we had a really intense conversation about, you know, just how the information it starts flooding and you get 100 times what you were looking for. And to your point, like, you know, it hears you and it's, it was incredible, you know, just...
And we're talking about the second generation of being the sandwich generation book too. The other people that are being really fed this stuff are our parents. Being fed the algorithms is our parents who have a lot of time on their hands in retirement to watch YouTube news or whatever and not realizing that it's, again, an algorithm.
Yeah, my mother is just like, did you know there's a cure for diabetes? And doctors are not sharing that? And I'm like, Mother, where did you get that?
Yep. YouTube. There's a doctor on YouTube.
I also wanted to give a quick plug to OWL because I'm thinking about that, and one of the good things about OWL is that it purposely, you know, we don't let parents teach their own kids for this same reason, you know, because kids will get this information a whole lot better with the connections that they're making with other people. And we talk about all these things, you know, values and information getting and all of of it. So it's really good once in a while to get that information from someone else, and that's why this place is so good. You know, this is such an amazing place for kids to grow
And
up
it's a really good
because
curriculum.
they have connections to all these great, wonderful, supportive people.
And it's a great curriculum. I mean, abstinence only does not work for, that's another one of my favorite stories is when my now oldest came home in 5th grade after doing DARE in school, and we had to sign the letter saying he was never going to drink alcohol or do any drugs. And I was like, this is scientifically, this does not work. This program does not work. I'm not signing this paper. And my husband's like, I think we should just sign the stupid paper and send it back to school. And I'm like, well, fine, we can sign the stupid paper and send it back to school, but we're having a conversation about this. And so at dinner, I'm like, okay, so bud, what'd you learn in DARE? After the paper, I'm never going to do that. I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to do that. And I'm like, okay, but did they explain, for example, the difference between marijuana and cocaine? He's like 10 or 11. He's like, what's cocaine? I'm like, see, they didn't teach him anything. It's like, okay, all right, you can have a conversation later at bedtime or in college.
Well, we're wrapping up, although so much more, we could dive into, and I think hopefully we can continue the conversations in different ways. I just want to open up if there's any last questions. I know it's getting late, but any last reflections or questions before we go? Yeah, Patrick.
If you're yourself trying to find your spirituality, how do you help your children find it? Or maybe start in the easy one. If you really know your spirituality, how do you communicate in a way that children will pick it up without feeling the pressure? And then the first question.
Yeah. Well, I think this one depends a lot on the age of the child. But I think along the same lines as everything else, like just sharing what's important to you and what you're thinking. And also if you're discerning, like anything you're discerning, I'm very big on, like, for example, so I work a lot with kids with type 1 diabetes and their parents, and I talk a lot about how, in that example especially, parents, are solving problems all the time, and just because it presents a lot of problems, so they're doing all this problem solving, and I'll encourage them to just verbalize it, just say it out loud, because how are they ever going to learn to solve the problem on their own if they don't know what's going on in your head? And so the parallel, right? How are they ever going to learn to discern something if they've never seen it done? And so, go back to those conversations I had with my grandmother around the kitchen table was her sharing her discernment with me, and that's how I learned to discern and think about things. So I think if you're not sure, you share your discernment. How do you kind of you can instill in kids, or you can follow their lead. I love that you read The Spiritual Child, because that's what so much about it, that book is about, is that children are innately spiritual.
Yes.
Right? So one of my other favorite stories is, again, my oldest, just because I guess the stories stick a little bit more, but when he was like in 3rd grade, it was bedtime, and he was like called from his room, Mama! I came in, he's like, the universe is so big and we are so small. And I was like, oh my God, yes, it's true. But they're just like, yeah, highly reactive. But they're just like noticing, and they see things, or oh, and even now my 15-year-old, like he's constantly pointing out, he's huge on just like, did you see the moon? It's beautiful. Did you see the sunset? Like, it's beautiful tonight. Like, just those things, like, yeah, isn't it gorgeous? Like, picking up and following on their cues for spirituality and their lead, I think, also.
And that, it's that inherent giftedness, calling out what is already there and cultivating it.
Yes. Yeah. And when they're little, even saying, like, for me, that's where I see God, is in a beautiful sunset, or
one of my foundational childhood spiritual experiences was my mother's extravagant applause at fall foliage. And we still make fun of her about it, because she whoops and applauds, but it made such an impression that it was sort of like a character.
it's well, to go back to Anne Lamott, it's right. Help, thanks, wow, like the
Yes,
wow
the wow.
prayers. The wow kids are really good at the wow prayers, and they pick up on the wow prayers.
And they help teach us.
Yeah.
How to wow. Yeah. I thought we would close with this prayer. It's actually near the beginning of the book, at the end of part 1, and then to more conversations to come. And thank you again to Ellen for being here tonight, and to everybody for coming out at the end of your Sunday, and for all the wisdom and insights shared. God, help me to see and love my children, our children, for who they really are, just as you made them. Help me to keep growing into the parent, grandparent, person I long to be, while knowing you love me just as I am. Give me the courage to make my kids unhappy in the short term for their long-term grit, resiliency, and joy, and for the good of the world. Amen. Thanks, everybody. Good night. Thanks to Ellen.
Thanks for having me.
And thanks, Chris, and thanks everybody who may have watched online. See you soon.